One of the most important things on the farm is your relations with your landlords, because quite often you don't have enough capital, especially when you're a young farmer, to own all of your land. So usually you're going to have to deal with others who do own the ground. And what type of rent arrangement will you have? And what other arrangements will you make with the landlord? How are you going to make this thing work long term? We wanted to discuss that a little bit today.
Well, Brian, the land we're standing on right here, we don't own.
Nope.
And so we have to work with somebody else. We've been farming this land for years. We've got a good long-term relationship and all those things. But you know what? Maybe in a couple of years we won't be farming it. Who knows where things are going to go. But there are things we want to do to this land to try and make it better than it was last year. And if you want to accomplish that on ground that you're renting, it requires a good relationship with your landlord.
On this ground that we're standing on, yeah, we farmed it for, I don't even know how long, 30 years now, something like that. But we don't have a long-term arrangement with this particular landowner. And now we've switched everything to cash rent. Used to do share rent, but now everything is cash rent. So if we put fertilizer out here on this field that we're not going to use this year, we're hoping that we're going to continue farming this ground for long term, and other investments, other improvements we make to the ground. That's one of the biggest challenges, in my opinion, that landowners face today is, yes, you can go out and try to get top dollar for your rent, but what other stipulations do you have in that rent contract? So for example, how about organic matter replacement or removal or buildup or degradation? Are we lowering over time the organic matter levels in the soil is what I'm saying. How about fertility removal? So if we pull 200 bushel per acre corn off of this field, well, we just removed 76 pounds of actual phosphate and 60 pounds of K2O potassium. Are we replacing those things? So these are considerations that you as a landlord have to look at, and as a renter, from our perspective, we want to make the ground better, like Darren said, but by the same token, we got a lot of dollars that we're going to put out to make the ground better.
You know, you hear all these stipulations that Brian thinks about. I just wonder who's going to rent Brian's ground someday when he retires, and what kind of contract
Am I going to be tough?
It's going to be a 100-page contract they're going to have to sign,
well, no,
and all
seriously.
these evaluations along the way.
Yeah, but I am dead serious. You've got to think about these things, and I do, because if it's ground that I own, I want that ground to continue being better over time. I don't want it to go backwards. I just know on our own farm, we've picked up a couple new pieces of ground in the last 3 years, and I can just tell you those couple of fields were awful because they'd been cash rented for many years, and nothing against the farmers that had them before, because they had 1-year leases on the ground. They hated to build the soil up when they knew they might lose it at some point. So, you know, there's got to be this working relationship that we're talking about with the landlord. It's got to go both ways.
We say it all the time on our show that we all have to be advocates for agriculture. We all have to say, you know, hey, look, this is what's great about farming. This is what's really happening with farming. The challenge is not many of us are great communicators, and you know, that's a tough thing. I know some farmers that actually send a newsletter out to their landlords with pictures of what they're doing on the farm, and explanation of, hey, here's why we're doing the strip tillage. Here's the reason that we switched to no-till on our farm. Here's what our fertility program is and how we're handling things. And they send it out to all their landlords, so the landlords, number one, know that, okay, this other landlord isn't getting treated better than me. We're all being treated the same. And number two, just so people kind of stay a little bit in touch, because if you don't inform non-farming people about what you're doing, where are they going to learn about farming from? They aren't.
Okay, here's kind of where our discussion stemmed from today. When most farmers are raising soybeans, they spend $25 an acre on fertilizer, if that. We're investing an extra $125. So now you take what the rent is plus $125 above and beyond what anybody else is doing, and now he's getting top rent, isn't he? In fact, beyond top rent, right? Well, yeah, I guess I didn't even figure that. Well, exactly, and that's my whole point. And unless we as farmers have these conversations with our landowners and their family members, their lawyers, that kind of thing, then of course they're just going to assume, well, I have to get top dollar on things. No, you want to make sure that your land is getting top dollar, and that comes in two different ways. One, building up the land, and two, the cash that you're going to get.
All right, let's take the hot topic right now, Brian, because there's a lot of farmers that I talk to every day that say, hey, I want to do some tiling in this ground. It'll really improve that land, but you know what? I don't own the land. How do I work with the landowner when I'm going to make a long-term improvement to their ground?
Sure, I will just tell you that we've worked with every landlord that we've got in our operation, and basically it comes down to one of two ways. Method number one is the landlord pays for everything, the tiling and our labor to put the tile in, and then we increase the rent automatically. And what we've done, and this is not to say that everybody has to do this, but we've just taken 10% of whatever the bill was. So for example, if we invested between our labor and everything else, and we have the landlord pay $400 per acre for tiling, then we raise the rent 10% of that, so $40 an acre. Okay, so pretty simple. Method number 2 is where we pay for everything and the landlord holds the rent for us over a fixed long-term lease, like let's call it a 5 or a 7-year lease, and the rent stays exactly the same. That allows us time to recover our investment.
Well, we've actually, and Brian said, we've worked with all our landlords about doing some tiling on their particular piece of ground. We've had some of those landlords come to us and say, I want mine done first. I'm really excited about this. I know it's going to help my ground. And you know, some come with one cash situation where, hey, they want to pay for everything, labor and everything. They just want it clean and easy, and I'm just going to pay for everything and I'm going to raise your rent. And others say, well, man, you know, I really want this to happen, but I'm on a fixed income and I can't afford to pay extra money right now.
Yep, the main thing that I try to stress to any of the landlords that we work with, and just farmers in general, is look, we're trying to make the ground better long term. Tiling will absolutely do that, and not only can we pay you more cash rent once that tile is in the ground, because your ground is now obviously going to produce more, your land instantly went up in value. Whatever you put in for tile, basically your land is probably worth that much more going forward. So these are just a couple of the major things that we're constantly talking to our landlords about, and I assume you are too if you're farming. And if you're a landlord out there, we want you to think about these things. Think about what's it going to take to make your ground better long term, and what kind of arrangement do you have with the tenants on your farm today. And I'd at least be discussing with them, what is their fertility plan? What is their tillage plan? What's their plan to build organic matter in your soil? It's not just about the cash rent. I know getting the cash is nice, but you want to try to leave that ground in better shape long term. And obviously the person renting the ground has to have a little extra money in order to be able to invest that money into your ground.
One other thing we didn't even get into, Brian, when it comes to landlords is keeping the weeds under control. Can you identify this week's weed of the week?